Crystal Askew,
I'm Krista Brenner,
Ariel Blatton,
Megan Pugh,
and Melissa Dozier.
and we are Blazing for Clyateville. We want you to come help us blaze for Clyateville. No, better yet, we need you to come help us blaze for Clyateville. Why, you ask? Well, first, let me introduce to you all the mission for Blazing for Clyateville. The mission for Blazing for Clyateville is to raise awareness about the history and trends of child poverty, social issues, raising poverty levels, high-need school systems, the effects on school and students' abilities to excel scholastically. Our objective is to not only educate you on the poverty-stricken areas of Clyateville, but to let you in on a little status of the poverty-stricken areas around the nation. Poverty-stricken areas, the impending doom. The impending doom is not only economical for those children in poverty-stricken areas. They do not choose where they want to go to school. They simply go. They want to get an education. It is not their fault that a paper mill plant, as you see here, as the last group talked about, is just miles away from their school. The smell is horrific, and you can see the pollution entering the air. Help us in the fight to end child poverty. Impossible, you say. You must not believe in our kids. You must not believe in those childhood-like dreams that we all once had. I dare you, stand up and help us fight for our children. And now we have Krista with why we chose this project.
At the beginning of this semester, I had the opportunity to explain to you a little bit of why we chose this project. My fiance, Zach Jones, was the parent-teacher liaison for Lowndes County, and he worked at Moulton Branch, Lake Park, but predominantly at Clyateville. And he really was an advocate for child poverty, and he truly made a difference in these kids' lives. And it's been the mission of the school and Zach's family and I to continue on in his legacy. He did things like starting a program for weekend food bags, which when he started there were 100 children, and now it is up to 250 children participating in the weekend food bags. He got eyeglasses fixed, he got shoes for children, but the big thing was he was just a friend to them, and he gave each kid someone to talk to. He sat and had lunch with the kid who had no friends, and he gave them their voice back. Like Crystal said, these children don't ask to be born into these families, they just are, and they're living in some very terrible situations. I've been working out there every Thursday morning this semester, and it does break my heart. So I think there's a lot that Zach's life can teach us of how to advocate for children, not just at Clyateville, but any children in poverty. So Ariel is going to talk about the history and trends of child poverty.
Hi guys. Okay, so history and trends of child poverty. As you can see here, there was a sharp decline in all types of poverty around like the 1960s, and that's because of the War on Poverty, which implemented plenty of social problem programs like Social Security, Medicaid, Medicare, and things of that nature. In 1970, a shift from elderly poverty to child poverty, and that's because when we implemented Social Security, that gave a status to elderly, and kids, they didn't have that much social programs for them. In the 1980s, the Reagan administration attacked these social programs. So basically, women's rates were low. It was cuts on income maintenance programs, i.e. food stamps, health care, and a new tax policy really devastated women, because at the end of the day, women are mostly hit with these types of poverty issues. Okay, so the president of these anti-poverty programs, policies impact poverty levels directly, along with what part of the population they are directed to. So in the 1990s, significant redistribution of anti-poverty funds were directed towards the elderly and disabled and away from children. Mostly, they were trying to affect women because of Ronald Reagan's welfare queen, if you guys know. So, lastly, the Great Recession, as you guys know, hit our economy really bad, and it affected a lot of social programs, even more than in the 90s and in the 80s. And therefore, with these deficits and debts, the budget cuts were just drastic. And of course, it affects women, which affect children, who are their primary caregivers. So historically speaking, the South has always been poor, but this is child poverty. And as you can see, there's a 48%, that's like the biggest of everywhere. Even though that's 46, 48 is pretty, devastating. And that's historically speaking. We know this, and from the Industrial Revolution, everything going from agriculture to industry, and of course the South did participate in that, and of course that affects us. So we have here the Georgia. This orange line right here represents the United States child poverty line, and the green is Georgia. So we're above the United States. The United States poverty is slightly above 22.5%, and Georgia is 27.5%. That's a lot. That's a 5% difference. Next is Lowndes County in Georgia. So like I said, Georgia is 27.5% and Lowndes County is 35%. So here in Lowndes County, we're above Georgia's poverty line, who's above the United States poverty line. That's a problem. Lastly, I want to talk about how rural areas are more in poverty than urban areas. A lot of times when we think of poverty and we think about the poor, we always think about urban, city, beggars. When you walk down, like in Atlanta, you see, lots of poverty is in your face, but rural poverty is hidden. We don't see it. And this blue line represents Georgia. The green line is Fulton County, and it's the same as Georgia's. Well, pretty much the same as Georgia's child poverty line. And then that's Lowndes County. Fulton is 24%, which is slightly above the United States. And Lowndes County is, of course, 35%. And now we have Megan with the child poverty.
A few things that I want to talk about, the social issues. So the first social issue that I want to discuss is the new face of poverty. As Ariel mentioned earlier, the face of poverty changed from the elderly to children, as she said, because of new social programs and new security programs for the elderly. Those things weren't implemented for children until a little bit later. So several trends have caused an upturn in the number of children in poverty since the 1970s. A little bit more history. World War II caused a visible shift in poverty generation. So that first generation after World War II was a little worse off a little better off, than the generation after them, because they were used to that type of environment. Also, children of minority, racial, and ethnic backgrounds are more inclined to be impoverished. As we all know, the face of poverty is generally a face of color. So it's pretty obvious that poverty does not, it's pretty ambiguous, which I'll talk about on the next slide. And the structure of family has also changed because more families are single mother-headed households. So what that means is when you have a child, a minority child, that's one strike. They're in a single mother-headed household, that's two strikes. And women already get paid less than men, period. And a single mother gets paid even less than a mother who is in a household with a husband. So, as I said, think sexist wage disparities and outdated gender roles and expectations. So in this country, we've been socialized to believe that it's women's role to stay at home, but they're also hit with, well, okay, you decided to have kids, so why don't you go work, but they don't get paid as much. So that's one of the problems that have confronted, or that poverty has caused. Another issue is poverty along racial lines. As I said before, poverty is not racially ambiguous. To be frank about it, poverty hits African American and immigrant minority families a lot harder than it hits white families. Latino and immigrant children are more likely to be impoverished, as are most African American children. And another thing about Latino and immigrant families is that they have higher birth rates, and also there tends to be a language barrier, so that in turn kind of accounts for a lower wage. A study showed that on average, a single Latino mother gets paid around $20,000 a year. That could be lowballing it, but it's not too different than what it is now. Also, on average, African American children are much more likely to experience long-term poverty than white children. And to kind of describe what long-term poverty means, it's poverty from about 5 to 15 years. And it's the most severe type of poverty because it's the most difficult poverty to escape from. And the effects of poverty are more severe, as I said, when they're long-term. In 1992, a study was done, and it showed that while white children are 60% of the poor, 90% of long-term poor children are African American or minority families. So that's just a little bit of math to show you. And the last social issue that I want to discuss is how income can promote segregation in schools. I know we kind of talked a little bit in here about how dividing school zones by income, as I said, can promote segregation in schools. So choosing school zones based on income levels encourages segregation. And what I mean by that is, generally speaking, minority families tend to be in lower income areas. So if you concentrate minority families in lower income areas and you take that concentration and that population and put them all in one school, there's going to be a racial divide. Also, lower income families are generally minority racial and ethnic groups, as I mentioned. Race-neutral zoning plans, which don't really exist, pretty much create income substitution zoning plans. So on the actual write-up of the plan, they'll call it a race-neutral zoning plan, not to give off the vibe that they're dividing by racial lines. But if you look at the plan itself, it is divided along income lines, which is essentially the same thing. And this is a quote from one of the articles that I read, and it says, "The school's socioeconomic context is strongly related to students' educational outcome." So what that means is if you take students from this low income area, more than likely they're going to have behavioral problems, they're going to not be able to focus in school because they come from a situation where they don't have those skills. And some things that aren't on the slide that I did want to talk about. As you can see here, I have drawn, it's not very good, guys. I drew a model of, for example, it's a counterexample. In the Bay Area of California, they zone their schools based on the hills in the city. So you have a population from the low part of the hill, which is usually lower income, to the high part of the hill, which is higher income. And so zoning it in the middle of the hill and going, between the zones that way kind of takes away from that income and that racially based school zone situation. And as I said before about the students' educational outcomes, the children at the poverty line, at or below the poverty line, have an increase in illness and a decrease in health in the community, which also decreases attentiveness. Also, it decreases children's development. And what that means is that, for example, they're not inclined to not act on impulses. They don't sit still. They don't focus well, especially on paper tests, which, as we all know, is a really big deal in school. So they end up getting lower test scores, and it's difficult for them to become habituated to that type of environment because they're not used to it. They don't get it at home because no one's there to have them, sit still, hey, do this homework, da-da-da-da. So they don't respond well. Whereas more privileged children from higher income areas, are more accustomed and more habituated to that type of behavior, so they perform better in school. And next, we'll have our survey results from Melissa.
All right, so we did a survey. As a group, we collected 60 surveys, and They had questions that we think affect child poverty and even more specific, Quietville. So I'm going to read these questions to you guys, and you can just raise your hand and say what you agree with, and I want you to like observe each other's answers. So government officials who have never worked in education are qualified to make decisions which affect our local schools. Agree or disagree? So if you agree, raise your hand. If you disagree, raise your hand. Look around and see if you next question. I consider politicians' views on education before voting to elect them. Yes or no? So yes. All right, no. Parents' income directly affects their children's future potential careers. Strongly agree? Agree? Neutral? Disagree? Or strongly disagree? Valdosta and Quietville receive equal amounts of funding to provide equal education. Agree? Disagree? Don't know? All right. Our next slide. This is all of the 60 surveys that we did, this compiled information. As you can see, there's not a whole lot of like definition and answers. I mean, they're kind of just spread out really close together. This is a problem because people are voting when they don't know. People are voting for people that they haven't researched. Child poverty is an issue that is, you know, these officials are working towards, but if you're voting for somebody that you haven't done any research on, you know, how's that going to increase it? A lot of you might not have children right now, but you will someday. So if we're not doing anything about this issue now, it's not going to be fixed later on down the road. That's all of us. We went to Quietville Elementary and volunteered at the Fall Festival. We made up these games. Krista did a lot of work at the school making these. We all, you know, made these little props and everything. So that's Kiss the Pig. It's pretty much pin the tail on the donkey, but it's a pig and its lips. And some were pretty grossed out by it, and some really liked it. So this is our fishing game where there was. Actually, Zach's parents and Krista were behind there, and Ariel did a wonderful job of keeping the kids into it. So they would just throw that thing over there, and then they would get some candy back, and they all thought it was amazing. This is Quietville Elementary School. It doesn't look any different than your normal school does. Here's some more pictures of us at the Fall Festival. There's some of the kids that came and played the games. There's Ariel doing her awesome job. That's the Kiss the Pig. You have to spin them in circles, and then they put the lips up on the pig. All right, and now Krista and Crystal are going to tell you about our face-to-face interviews.
We got to spend a very fun Thursday afternoon with some of the children, and we just wanted to quickly introduce them to you. So these were our pre-kindergarten friends that we met. We have Jordan in the top corner. He's 5 years old and he wants to be a truck driver when he grows up. Logan in the middle is also 5. He also wants to be a truck driver. Brianna wants to be a teacher, and Genesis would like to be a teacher as well. Pre-K, we did not see a lot of variety. Someone said SpongeBob, they all sort of ran with it.
Now we have our kindergarten students. To your left, we have Aiden. He's 5. He wants to be an architect, which is really good. London in the middle. She's 5. She wants to be a fashion designer. And Maria, who's so sweet, she's 5 and she wants to be a teacher.
We went to the 3rd grade then, and we met Abby, who's 8, and she would like to be a vet. Omarion, who would like to be a math teacher, and Deliana, we're guessing is how you pronounce her name, and she wanted to be a sheriff.
Now for the 4th grade, we have Cameron, who's 9, he wants to be in the Navy. Aaron, who's 10, he wants to be an NBA player. And Jose, who is 10 as well, he wants to be an NBA Air Force.
Our last stop was the 5th grade, where we got to sit with Daisha, who's 11, and she would like to be an artist and a doctor when she grows up. So we wish her the best of luck. Bridget is 11, and she would like to be a teacher when she grows up, and Rosalinda would like to be a vet. On the back of your flyers that we made for you, there are some of these profiles back there, and we ask questions of what is one thing you wish your school had, and what is one thing you wish your family had. So it was very interesting to talk to them about that.
And just some career facts. If these students actually want to go on and advance in these careers, they may not know of the cost that it would cost for them to be educated. And it's a good number of things and very high if you look closely. A sheriff, the education for a sheriff is about $27,000. A vet is $33,000, as well as an artist and doctor, about $36,000 for the cost to go to school. And a fashion designer is about $20,000, and an architect is about $28,000. Now, once they get older and they realize that they're in these poverty-stricken areas, my hope is that they don't get discouraged, and they don't give up on their dreams. And I'm really passionate about it.
I know we're cutting close on time, so I just really quickly wanted to talk to you about the sociological perspective behind this. We can say a lot of sociological things about child poverty, but if we look at it from a functionalist view, it would definitely tell us that some people have to be poor and some people have to be rich, because it puts the best suited people into those jobs. The conflict theory would say that people have to be in opposition with each other, and that it is inevitable that we are going to work against each other and that there will be discrimination and prejudice. And the symbolic perspective would say that stratification like this affects our beliefs, values, and how we label each other, and in turn, how we treat each other. I won't bore you with too many facts and theories, but I don't think you can think about child poverty without considering intergenerational and intragenerational mobility, structural strain, which says the tension is caused by the gap between cultural goals and how people can get them. We've already talked about the feminization of poverty with the increase of single mothers and the just world hypothesis. We've all been socialized to believe that this is just true and it's the way it is. Bill Gates is just going to be rich and Abby and Clattville's going to be poor. So in the future, what can you do? Zach's parents and I are in the process of finishing paperwork to start a nonprofit organization in Zach's memory, so we are going to continue a lot of this work. There's always food drives, clothing drives, school supply drives. They've started collecting money for utilities for all these kids who come to school and say, we don't have a house anymore because my power got turned off. And these children have said this to my face, that they have no food, they have no clothing, they have no power. And I don't want to break down and sob in front of them because they just think it's normal that mom has disappeared for a 3-day binge on meth, which was a story I got this week. And it just destroys me, but they just think that mom's doing her best. So the parent resource room, which has been named in Zach's memory, it's called the Zach Zone, is really beneficial for the community and to help the families. There's also money that's used for children to go on field trips because, you know, we talk about cultural capital in our sociology classes, and these kids will never have access to things like that. So that's something that we've become part of. The picture in the middle is a fun run that we do to raise money that gives a scholarship to a student for when they go to college, so they don't get the money right now. It's a savings bond for when they're ready to start college, because we're trying to encourage them that they can have their dreams. And the See a Need, Meet a Need is one that Clattville started because Zach inspired people to not just see a problem, but to actually do something about it. And I love that you use the Howard Zinn book, because that's what I was thinking about, that if we just stay silent and complacent, we're basically encouraging the issue. So the last thing, I don't know how to turn it on. This is your pep talk, your motivation for the day.
I think we all need a pep talk. The world needs to stop being boring. Yeah, boring is easy. Everybody can be boring, but you're good at that. Life is not a game, people. Life isn't a cereal either. Well, it is a cereal. And if life is a game, are we on the same team? I mean, really, right? I'm on your team, you're my team. This is not people. You got air coming through your nose. You got heartbeat. That means it's time to do something. A poem. 2 roads diverged in the woods, and I took the road less traveled. It hurt, man. We were rocks, thorns, and glass. The fire broke. Wah! Not cool, Robert Frost. The ones that weren't too fast. I won't be the one that leads to awesome. It's like that dude Journey said. Don't stop believing. Unless your dream's stupid. Be a better man and keep going. Keep going, keep going, and keep going. Well, Michael Jordan got quit. Well, he did quit. So he retired. Yeah, that's retired. Before that, high school. What if he quit when he didn't make the team? He would have never made Space Jam. What will be your Space Jam? What will you create when you make the world awesome? Nothing if you keep sitting there. That's why I'm talking to you today. This is your time. This is my time. It's our time. We can make every day better for each other. If we're all on the same team, let's start acting like it. We got work to do. We can cry about it. Oh, we can dance about it. You were made to be awesome. Let's get out there.
So we thought that video was perfect because we want to inspire kids that they can have their dreams, and just because their parents' income might not allow London to be a fashion designer one day, that they can change their stars and make something of their lives. So we want to thank you for listening to us. My life is my message was one of Zach's favorite quotes, and I have a tattoo on my wrist. It's in Latin. I can't pronounce it, but he had it. It's age quod agis, and it just stands for do what you do, but whatever you do, do it well.